The Work of Strangers Project, Brazil and Philippines, by
Natalie Stoy,
McKenna Kewen.
Jordan Keel.
Paige Larkin,
Nick Kramer.
and Emily Lockhart.
Introduction of early childhood in Brazil. In Brazil, early childhood education is considered a child's right and a key part of the country's effort to reduce inequality. ECE is publicly founded and preschool is mandatory starting at age 4. The curriculum focuses on play, social interaction, and holistic development. Unlike the United States, where early childhood is often privatized and expensive, Brazil sees it as a public responsibility, especially for low-income families. However, Brazilian early childhood education teachers still face low pay and limited resources, especially in rural or Bolivia areas. Both countries value young children. The cultural and policy differences around who provides care and how the work is supported. Both countries have very different narratives about education, equality, and responsibility.
Yeah, to kind of go off that responsibility, I have some constitutional affirmations from Brazil regarding early childhood education. It's recognized as the right of the child and a duty of the state, and by law, public funding must be allocated to ensure access. About 25% of I think government taxes here go right to maintenance of schools and other starting new schools. And then I believe 18% federal. Oh no, 18% federally, 25% state. So it's really mandated there that all children go into education programs.
So on the right, I have a little table that will go more in depth into the key facts, but I'm just going to read the key facts. In Brazil in 1988, Brazil enshrined early childhood education ages 0 through 6 as a legal right, making it a governmental duty. 2009, preschool for ages 4 to 5 was added to the Constitution, part of only 3 countries matched with public preschool. Enrollment grew from 51% in 1999 to 81% in 2009. The Brazilian National Common Curricula Base for ECE emphasized play-based learning. Teachers support and funding programs like Pro BNCC and Novas Turums have opened thousands of new preschools. Despite strong policy, access and quality remain uneven. 92% enrollment in ages 4 to 5, but the 8% excluded are often the most vulnerable, especially in rural and Afro-Indigenous communities. Policy historically enforced Euro-American norms, but are increasingly recognized. Local caregiving traditions promoted and cultural grounded predity. Brazil's feminist and literacy movement in the 1970s and 80s helped embed ECE as a public rights-based policy tied to women's childcare needs and empowerment. In Brazil, early childhood education is shaped by a natural curriculum, BNCCEI, that views it as a constitutional right and emphasizes play, emotional development, and cultural identity. Children learn through storytelling, movement, music, and social interaction, often with materials and traditions that highlight Afro-Brazilian and indigenous heritage. Teachers in many classrooms are colorful, nature-inspired spaces designed to spark creativity and exploration. In contrast, early childhood education in the United States varies from state and tends to focus more on readiness, preparing children for kindergarten through structured lessons in numbers, letters, and routines. While Brazil's centers connection and identity, the United States often emphasize academic preparation. To close, Brazil's approach to early childhood education offers a powerful example of what it means to treat children's growth and development as a public good, not a private luxury. By embedding ECE into its constitution, supporting play-based and culturally rooted curricula, and aiming to serve even the most low-income communities, Brazil frames early childhood as a foundation for social equality. Though challenges remain, particularly in rural access area and teaching support, Brazil's commitment to a national version for its youngest citizens is clear. In contrast, the United States continues to treat early education as optional and often out of reach for low-income families. This comparison reveals how cultural narratives about responsibility, identity, care shape not only educational outcomes, but also entire systems. Brazil reminds us that early childhood education is not just preparation for school, it is preparation for life, and how society chooses to invest in its children's reflect the kind of future it hopes to hold.
Yeah, uh, in the BNCC's curriculum, it's more than I'd say the American narrative where school is about learning to get more educated and work a job. The BNCC takes a strong commitment to learning through experience and culture rather than academic instruction. Here's a video, or it's a picture from a early childhood education website in Brazil. It's ages 4 to 5. There's a lot of different pictures of what goes on inside a Brazilian classroom. And here there's a child doing a picture activity.
I am going to be talking about education administration and workplace culture in Brazil. If you look up education administration in a dictionary, it simply means managing and leading schools to help students learn and succeed. But when we look deeper, we see that in Brazil and the United States, history, culture, and politics shape how school leaders do their jobs today. In Brazil, the education system is managed by the Ministry of Education, founded in 1930, which set policies for the whole country. Brazilian school leaders often focus on building personal relationships along with working flexibility, flexible with their communities. These cultural values, along with social inequalities, create unique challenges for education administrators. My part of this presentation will be explaining some important differences and similarities between how schools are led in Brazil and America, helping us understand how education administration adapts to different cultures and political relationships. So I have a quote saying, washing one's hands of the conflict between the powerful and the powerless means to side with the powerful, not to be neutral. That is by Paulo Freire. That is a high educator in Brazil, like it's a known educator in Brazil. It's basically saying that if you're just ignoring the conflict between people who have power of those who don't, you're not really being neutral. By standing out of it, you're actually helping the powerful side because you're letting things stay the way they are. So sometimes staying neutral means you're taking sides without even realizing it. Moving on, cultural narratives in Brazilian education administration. In Brazil, the cultural stories about work and education is very much about connection and collaboration. School leaders are not just managers, they are community builders who work hard to establish trust and open communication among teachers, students, and families. Brazil is a diverse country, and schools in different regions face different conditions. For example, schools in large cities may have more resources, while rural or poor areas, often called favelas, struggle with shortages of materials and trained staff. This means education leaders must adapt their leadership style and strategies depending on where they work. Another important cultural narrative is the idea of democratic management. This means that families, students, and community members are encouraged to participate in school decisions. This participation reflects a cultural value of shared responsibility and helps schools better meet local needs. Overall, the narrative shows that work in Brazilian education administration is flexible, and deeply connected to the community. So I have a song by Caetano Veloso. It's all about, I had to look this one up because it's all in Brazil, so I had no idea. But it's basically just a strong sense of community that is central to Brazilian identity. It reflects how collective identity and cultural traditions influence education, emphasizing collaboration and respect for diversity within schools and communities. This music highlights the importance of working together, mirroring the nature of education leadership in Brazil. My next slide is about key facts about Brazilian education administration. So directors, this is what we call administrators, they call directors, usually have prior teaching experience and education qualifications. Directors manage school resources, staff, and learning environment. Leadership includes promoting teaching qualities and implementing nation curriculum. Directors foster collaboration with families, communities, and school councils. Continuous training programs like Project support professional development. Directors are responsible for financial administration and accountability. Many directors face challenges like underfunding, high dropout rates, and inequality. differences affect resources availability and working conditions. So I also have another link. It's basically just a documentary exploring Brazilian political history during the military dictatorship. It's just like it helps explain the challenges faced by education leaders who've had to navigate political upheaval and reform efforts. Understanding this historical context is key to appreciating why Brazilian education administrators often work with complex and challenging environments. Then, key differences in education administration. I have a table of just all the things we're going to go over today. So if you move on, there is a photo, but I'll get to that later. American education administrators often work with a system that includes both public and private schools. American schools offer students a balance between a board education, like studying many subjects and special training for future careers. Administrators have to follow many laws from different levels of government, such as federal, state, and local authorities. The cultural values of being on time, working efficiently, and achieving a clear goal like test scores or graduation rates. While in Brazil, their education has a stronger focus on focalization training, especially at higher education levels where students usually choose a specific career path early on. Brazilian schools face many difficulties such as economic inequalities, which means some students have fewer chances to get a good education. Public schools often have limited funds and resources. Also, school schedules are more flexible and government processes can be slower, which administrators must manage carefully. Differences between regions in Brazil makes school leaderships even more complex. So I've actually been to Brazil before and I was all over, like I was in Berlin, the capital, and just like different little areas. And I could see that in like Berlin, the big city, it like there's schools, like there was so many and it was just big buildings. While I was going up the mountains, I saw these little schools and you could just tell like there wasn't like any buses, there wasn't people were walking to get their kids. And it just shows the difference because while in like in the big cities, there was like it was easier to manage while the smaller cities weren't. And finally, the conclusion. Looking at education administration and work culture in Brazil and the United States shows us how culture, history, and social issues shape the jobs and challenges of school leaders. Brazil education systems led by the Ministry of Education since 1930 focus on leaderships and value relationships, community involvement, and flexibility. This way of working helps deal with big differences between regions, limited resources, and complicated government rules. Brazilian school directors often connect with their communities and balances, managing resources with involving families, teachers, and students in decisions. Their leadership changes depending on local needs and focuses on teamwork and trust to face challenges. In the US, education administration is more structures and following clear rules about efficiency, responsibility, and measurable goals. School leaders are selected and trained through formal processes to keep standards consistent. The education system mixes broad knowledge with clear preparation. While this system offers stability and clear goals, it sometimes doesn't pay enough attention to the social and personal sides of schooling. When we compare these two, we see that neither one alone solves all the problems of education leadership. A new idea combines Brazil's flexibility, relationship focused on leadership, and America's clear structure and accountability. Understanding cultural differences and encouraging leadership that includes community can help school leaders everywhere build schools that would work well and are fair for all students. In the end, education administration is not just about running schools, it's about understanding people, culture, and society to help every student succeed.
So my stuff is about about nursing in Brazil. Nursing in Brazil plays a vital role in the country's healthcare system. The nursing workforce includes higher education, trained nurses, and a large number of technicians and assistants. Over the last decade, the number of nursing education programs have increased, especially in the private sector. The expansion has brought challenges such as a high dropout rate and unequal training quality. Despite the improvements in workforce numbers, there are disparities in the distribution of nurses across the country. Rural and northern areas suffer shortages, and government programs and educational reforms have made it a mission to address these gaps, but issues like burnout and low wages remain an ongoing concern. A couple of the key facts about nursing in Brazil is that nursing in Brazil is overwhelmingly female, about 86 to 83% women. Brazil accounted for 1/3 of all global nursing deaths due to COVID-19, resulting from lack of PPE, heavy workloads, no rest areas, and high occupational stress. And then all nurses must be registered with COREN, the regional council in Brazil, and they're overseen by COFEN, which is the Federal Council of Nursing. And nursing in Brazil faces several significant challenges. Many nurses work under difficult conditions, including long hours, low wages, and overcrowded public hospitals. There's often a shortage of staff and resources, which puts immense pressure on healthcare professionals and affects patient care. And then additionally, nurses sometimes face limited opportunities for professional development and recognition, which can lead to more burnout and low morale. Some of the key differences I found between Brazil and the US is the Brazilian law doesn't strictly cap hours. Public sector often uses 30 hours a week, while private sectors sees 40 to 44 hours a week. To become a registered nurse, it takes 4 years at a university, but for technical nurses, they have a shorter specialized track. There's much lower wages in comparison. In public hospitals, they often earn the equivalent of $8,000 to $15,000 in US dollars a year. And then nurses in Brazil have less autonomy compared to the US and cannot prescribe medication or perform certain procedures without a physician. In the US, they have higher average salaries. RNs earn around 75,000 to 90,000 a year, depending on experience and location. And our nursing system is regulated by state boards, and they have high emphasis on continuing education and licensure. One of the quotes I found was from them, like nurses in Brazil that were protesting that in the system, Brazil is forced to transfer value to imperialist countries in a country where health accounts for 10% of the gross domestic product. This happens through the overexploitation of health workers, an area increasingly dominated by multinational capital. So this table basically just is the breakdown of Brazil's schooling and what they require, and then the United States and what they require to become a nurse. And the requirements for the United States is a lot more. And then for the unique and shared traits, I'll just read a couple of them. Nurses are frequently depicted in Brazilian novels and soap operas and films, often as nurturing, underpaid, or romantic figures, which is kind of close to what ours is in the US, but I would say ours is more dramatic and not realistic to what the real world is. Their stories, especially during the pandemic, have inspired documentaries, photojournalism, and theater portraying everyday heroism. There's a documentary about the frontline nurses during COVID that was made in 2021. In Brazil, nursing leadership roles play a vital role across healthcare settings. Key roles include the nurse manager, who oversees nursing teams and ensures compliance with regulations, the clinical nurse coordinator, who manages care with specific hospital units, and the director of nursing, responsible for strategic planning and organizational leadership. Nurses also lead in education, public health, and within the councils influencing policy and professional standards nationwide. In conclusion, the struggles faced by Brazil's nursing sector, such as underfunding, staff shortages, and poor working conditions, stand in stark contrast to the relatively better resourced healthcare system in the United States. These challenges not only impact the quality of care, but also shape Brazil's cultural narrative around healthcare, where nurses are seen as overburdened yet essential heroes in the system that undervalues them. This contrasts with the US, where although nurses do also face challenges, there's generally greater institutional support and professional recognition. The ongoing hardships in Brazil reflect broader social and economic inequalities and contribute to a national identity deeply rooted in resilience and collective struggle.
Alrighty, so for the introduction of software engineering in Brazil, Brazil has a rising number of software engineers with an estimated 500,000 people pursuing a career in software development. So many are very skilled at the main programming languages, including JavaScript, HTML, SQL, Python, Java, and more. As the amount of people in tech rises, the more that the US outsources to get credible work for a low cost. And then for the next slide, so it's the key facts regarding software engineering. So some of my favorite key facts included are the SUJava is Brazil's Java group that was founded back in 1999 and is considered the largest Java user group in the world with over 40,000 plus members. The other one is the Porto Digital in Recife is a tech hub that hosts over 350 companies and is often referred to as the Brazilian Silicon Valley. And then lastly, Brazil's devs rank 14th globally in tech and second in data science, according to the Coursera Global Skills Report from 2023. All right, so for the key differences, honestly, the work is fairly similar in Brazil and the US, but I think that the main differences would be firstly, the US job market for engineers is insanely challenging, and the interview process requires multiple rigorous interviews and showcasing of talents. Whereas Brazil, all you really need is the degree, and then you are almost immediately accepted. Another one is the salary is obviously drastically different, which is why the US outsources from multiple countries, especially in Brazil and India. Brazil is also client driven, where the US is more project driven. And then lastly, Brazil has a strict 44-hour work week, while the US sticks to 40 and is pretty flexible depending on the company that you work for. Alrighty, and then these are just a bunch of different stats that come from LinkedIn regarding technology ranks, data science ranks, and then number of IT specialists per expertise. And then lastly, for the conclusion, Brazil is considered a newly industrialized or developing country where many pursue careers in tech to overcome social inequality and income disparities. Public universities such as USP and Unicamp offer an amazing STEM education that utilizes merit-based exams, which means that eligibility for job opportunities or scholarships are fully based on individual skills and knowledge rather than factors like financial status or personal connections, which is extremely prevalent in the US school system, unfortunately. But the global jobs also allows for Brazilian developers to earn significantly more than their peers in local wages, as contracting with the US and European companies allows the pay to be 2 to 5 times higher than it would be if they worked for a company in Brazil. And Brazil's cultural narrative reflects resilience, aspiration, and determination as they continue to grow through local limitations.
I'm going to be talking about healthcare in general in Brazil. In Brazil, people can go to the doctor or hospital without having to pay a lot of money because the country has something called SUS, and it's like free healthcare for anyone who lives there. And if someone gets sick or hurt, they can just go to like the clinic and then get help and they don't have to pay any money. Doctors and nurses who work for SUS help people with all kinds of things like giving shots, checking fevers, helping about bones. Sometimes there are long lines. Not all hospitals have enough staff for them, but it's still really helpful since they don't have to pay as much. Some people in Brazil also have private health care, which means they pay extra money every month to go to special hospitals or doctors faster. These places might be fancier or have shorter wait times, but not everyone can afford them. And then in Brazil, healthcare is for everyone, even though it's not perfect. It helps a lot of people stay healthy. Some facts are Brazil spends less money on healthcare per person than the US, but still covers everyone with basic care. The US has shorter wait times for special doctors and surgeries, but not everyone can afford them. Brazil has public hospitals, while the US has more private hospitals. About 75% of people in Brazil use the SUS system. In the US, most people just use private insurance. And then lastly, even though Brazil offers free care, sometimes the hospitals are crowded and don't have enough equipment or room. An example versus the United States could say, Lucas in Brazil and Emma in the United States both wake up with a really bad sore throat and need to go to the doctor. Lucas tells his mom he's feeling sick. His mom takes him to the public clinic, part of Brazil's free healthcare system called SUS. They wait a little while in line because it's busy, but when it's Lucas's turn, the doctor checks his throat and says he has a throat infection. The doctor gives him a prescription for free medicine that Lucas picks up right at the clinic or nearby pharmacy. They don't have to pay anything for the visit or the medicine because the government covers that. Even though they had to wait a little bit, Lucas got help without having to worry about paying anything. Emma from the US tells her mom she feels sick too. Her mom calls the family doctor to make an appointment. They go the next day and the doctor sees Emma quickly. The doctor says Emma has a throat infection and gives her a prescription. Emma's family has health insurance, so they only pay a small fee at the doctor's office. But if they didn't have insurance, they might have had to pay a lot more, sometimes over $100. The medicine at the pharmacy might also cost more if they don't have insurance. Both Lucas and Emma got the care they needed, but Lucas didn't have to pay anything, but had to wait longer. And then Emma got help quickly, but it would be more expensive without insurance. In the end, both Brazil and the United States work hard to take care of their people's health, but they do it in very different ways. Brazil gives free healthcare to everyone through its public system, which is great because nobody's left out, but sometimes it means long waits or less fancy equipment. In the US, healthcare is often very high quality and fast, especially with insurance, but it can also be very expensive and hard to get if you don't have coverage. Each system has its good parts and challenges, and no system is perfect. Learning about how different countries take care of their people helps us understand what's important when it comes to staying healthy. Whether it's Lucas in Brazil or Emma in the US, what really matters is that everyone should be able to get help when they're sick. Maybe one day, by learning from each other, countries can make healthcare even better for everyone. And then that's just a picture of the healthcare in Brazil, which looks very busy and dirty almost.
I think that's it.
Yep.